very excited to have Debra Williamson with us. I have been so we've known each other for quite a long time. I'm a proud eMarketer alum, and just had whether it's folks from my era there, which is actually '01 to '04. I mean, so much of what I learned about anything in this industry is based on my time, like reading all the reports and writing articles that a recent college grad had no business writing about, like the online grocery market or like B2B commerce in Estonia and all these weird things that I wound up getting to know about. So just and the analyst team there over decades has been tremendous. So getting to know Debra and her work's been a real treat. And now as Debra's with Sonata Insights, she's got some things to share about what's happening in AI. And so it's like one of my like way up there on my list of favorite folks to get to learn from. So excited to have you here, Debra, so you can meet more of the community, and I can't wait to see what's in store today. So welcome.
Awesome. Thank you. So, oh my gosh, you left eMarketer in 2004?
Yeah.
So that was 20 years ago. Oh goodness.
Crazy.
Okay. Wow. All right. So hey everybody. I am really excited to be here. I've been a member of the AI Marketers Guild for several months. You probably see me on Slack and in some of the meetings. And I was really excited when David asked me to come and speak to you. So before we get started, can we go ahead and launch the poll?
Yeah, we've got a timely one this week, and I appreciate Debra suggesting this. And we should do more of these here, but let's see. I'm glad we have Apple AI here because I'm very curious about thoughts from the community about what you're excited about with this. And we've got more than a dozen answers in. Let's just give you a minute. We've got more than half participants now who have answered. So
yeah, I think we've got a leader here.
Yeah, well,
Awesome.
I think we got quorum here, so we can share the results, and so everyone's stuck with the top two. Noteworthy but not revolutionary is the clear majority. What's your take, Debra?
Awesome. Yep, that's where I would have come in as well. I was really hoping that Apple would really come out with something huge and game-changing like we've seen, and maybe it will be. You know, obviously the job of an analyst is to try to predict what might happen, and then if we're wrong, we change our stories. So we'll see what happens. But this was such great timing for what I want to talk to you about today, which is the state of consumers and AI, usage of AI, and how it's developing and what we can learn from past tech cycles. So I have a presentation I'm going to share. All right. And
by the way, I am curious, especially for those who said it will be game changing. I'd love to hear remarks in the comments too, and just see some things that maybe the 70% we're missing on that front. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, just to kind of give you a quick overview. Hold on one sec, my cursor's not working. There it is. So yeah, I'm Debbie. I provide custom research and advisory services. My business is called Sonata Insights. I was at eMarketer for 19 years. I led the social media research practice and ended up being kind of by luck following college students back in the day as a demographics analyst, realizing that social media was kind of an important thing and establishing the practice there. And so now that I've parted ways with eMarketer. My new company is continuing to focus on social media, but more and more I'm looking at AI. And the lens that I like to look at it through is what's happening with consumer behavior. How is it changing? What does that mean for marketers? And how can you best reach consumers in the AI space? So we spend a lot of time in this group and other places talking about the internal uses of AI, to make our marketing more efficient or to make our organizations more efficient. So today we're going to kind of look outside and look at what's going on in the consumer landscape. And the lens I wanted to do that through was looking at past tech cycles. So, we've seen, sorry, my cursor is just not going, I'm going to have to use my mouse. So we've seen a lot of change over the past few decades. I've seen most of it either as a journalist or as an analyst. And I'm going to take you through briefly three disruptive tech cycles before we get to AI, which is the most obviously important to us today and the bulk of the presentation. But we're going to look at broadband and some of the major consumer changes that happened there. We're going to then look at social media and what changes in consumer behavior and marketing there, followed by smartphones, and then, of course, the AI era. So let's get started and rewind all the way back to the late 90s, early 2000s, and the dot-com boom. So at that time, I was an analyst no, I wasn't an analyst at that point. I was a journalist working at the Industry Standard, which some of you might remember. It was the magazine that was kind of the leader of the dot-com era. We were the largest magazine in ad pages in the year 2000. And then in 2001, we went bankrupt. So that's the story of the Industry Standard. But one of the biggest things that happened during that era was the rise of broadband. So, broadband was something that absolutely changed everything, changed the dynamic. As people moved from looking at things through the painful process of dial-up to actually being able to access at higher speeds, we saw huge changes in the types of things that people engaged in online. So, for example, they started going online more often. Kind of obvious, right? It's easier to get online, so why not do it more? They started searching more often. We saw a rise of companies like Google, Yahoo, and Netscape. Shopping online became a thing, and companies like eBay and Amazon started to emerge during this era. And of course, reading the news online. So if any of you were working in print media back in the day, like I was, you had to have a website, and more people started reading your content online. And that spawned a larger and larger digital advertising business to reach all of these consumers. Another thing that was really important is that as we started to get more and more broadband access, it became a lot easier to engage with others and with online content. So back in 2002, which, literally eons ago in internet time, we already saw huge increases in the amount of hours per week that people were spending with things like instant messaging or browsing or email when they had broadband over dial-up. And these things obviously continued. And so now, the hours obviously are much higher than they were back then. But the broadband impact was just absolutely incredible. Another thing that broadband did was it helped drive these huge increases in online spending to buy things, to purchase online. Remember, Amazon, eBay, these kinds of companies were brand new back then. But once broadband started to take hold, we saw increases year over year. I went back into eMarketer's database, which I have access to through many of the reports that I published over the years. And it was interesting to see that there was a 65% increase in 5 years in spending online. And I attribute a lot of that to the rise of broadband and the easier access to just having things to buy. So that gives you a sense there. And so now we're going to move a few years into the future, into the social media era. So I got my start covering social media because, like I mentioned earlier, I was paying attention to college students. So I was a demographics analyst at eMarketer, and I went to the University of Washington campus to interview college students for a report I was doing on college students and how their communication patterns were changing. And the more I talked to the students, the more I got the sense that they were using email to talk to their parents or their professors, but they were using social media, platforms like Facebook or MySpace or Friendster to interact with their friends. So I went back to my bosses at eMarketer and I said, this is kind of something maybe we should pay attention to because young people are typically on the vanguard of new technologies. And lo and behold, 19 years later, social media is still this amazing, huge thing. And it enabled consumers to not only get closer to each other, but to brands, which I think is a really important dynamic. So from the consumer standpoint, just to recap some of the major changes that happened in the social media era, public sharing suddenly, started to become a new normal. So instead of talking to our friends on the phone or emailing them, we were posting online. We were sharing where we were checking in, we were posting pictures of our kids. We were, talking about all sorts of things and trying to get, attention for ourselves. And so as a result, there was a new currency for social media and just for your social capital in general. We counted up friends and followers and likes. We still do that. But before social media, that wasn't really a thing. Like I mentioned, it became a lot more comfortable to connect directly with brands. And I don't know if some of you maybe were back working in social media or working in digital marketing back in the early days, but I remember talking to people who launched an organic website, an organic social media presence on Facebook, and then posted something, and then were sort of shocked when people started responding to them because they didn't really know what to do with with those comments. And even worse, when somebody started complaining, there were a lot of brands who just wanted to delete those comments. And of course, we learned that was not the right thing to do, but it also became a customer service nightmare and forced companies to really change their practices and their policies in terms of how they reached consumers. Social media also obviously created a huge advertising business to reach all of these, millions and now billions of people around the world who are using social media still on a regular basis. A couple other things that happened during the social media era: average people became influencers. Influencer marketing existed before social media, but it didn't really become the huge thing that it is today until social media came around and more people started realizing that, hey, I could have influence over my friends if I start talking about the things that I like and the brands that I like. And oh, by the way, brands are going to start paying me for this. And then on a personal note, social networks satisfied needs that before social media, we didn't even know that we had. So when teens and young adults were surveyed by Deloitte back in 2009, 80% of them said that they thought that the main value of social networks was to interact with more friends than they could offline. And so suddenly having that more friends and that social capital of friends, followers, and likes was incredibly important. Same with the idea of connecting. Social networks, IM, and texting were a great way to connect with my friends. 80% of teens believed that as of 2009. And social media was only a few years old. Obviously, that's something that's also continued until this day. Let's move another few years into the future and talk about smartphones. So, the smartphone era was another major shift in technology. And what it gave us was information on demand and on the go. To recap just a few things that changed, obviously, once you had a smartphone, you talked, texted, and messaged more often because you had that device directly in your hand. I remember when I got my first Apple iPhone, it was unbelievable. Like I couldn't believe just how different the experience was of being able to tap and click around and do everything I wanted to, almost everything I wanted to do right there in my hand and access apps. I mean, it was such a night and day experience compared to, the flip phone that we used to have, that it also, changed other things like just the idea of being able to share news events in real time. I mean, social media was a huge place where people did that. You might remember that there was this classic time when somebody witnessed a plane that had crashed into the Hudson River. And so now, someone made photos of it and put them on Twitter, and suddenly that became a thing. And brands started following, real-time activities, and they wanted to, be in the moment, share in that moment. So, gaming is another thing that people did more online. David, I'm sorry, I have to ask you. I got a notification that my AirPod just died, but can you still hear me okay
Yeah,
on
yeah,
the
you're
call?
coming in great. Yeah. Yeah, you're coming in great. Can you hear me?
Okay. Hoping that's a yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Awesome. Okay, good. So going on and moving on. So in addition to gaming, ride sharing, and turn-by-turn directions, again, something that never didn't really exist before we had smartphones, and the ability to, hail an Uber from the street corner in Manhattan, or punch into Google Maps directions of where we wanted to go, and then blindly trust it as it navigated us left, right, down the street, around the corner, on this highway. And you crossed your fingers and you hope that they were right. And usually they were, which was back then quite incredible. Mobile and retail intersected in new ways. By 2019, 56% of adults who shopped in stores said they were using their smartphones to research. So they were pulling up their phones, standing in front of the vacuum cleaners, trying to decide whether they were going to buy, which model they were going to buy. They were pulling up their phones to do the research. And sometimes, and more often, you're using your phone to buy it rather than buying it in the store. And as a result, this year, m-commerce is going to represent 45% of total US retail e-commerce sales. The smartphone also has become the new TV for many, many of us, not only young people, of course, but people of all ages, watching videos not only on TikTok, but YouTube, Netflix, you name it. Video is an enormous use case for smartphones. And at the end of the day, now mobile in general has become the #1 way that consumers access the internet, accounting for over 2/3 of total worldwide internet traffic, according to SimilarWeb. So you're probably wondering at this point, why have I spent however many minutes of this presentation talking about the past? We're the AI Marketers Guild, right? We're supposed to be talking about AI, and we're going to, but I wanted to give you a sense of what all of these tech cycles have in common, because they also have something in common with the AI era. And there's one word that I think exemplifies what each of these cycles, the dot-com era of broadband, social media, and smartphones have in common. And that is this single word, connection. Each of these tech cycles, I believe, change the way that consumers connect. They connect with content, but also connect with each other. But each of these tech cycles also change the way that consumers connect with brands. And I think that's something that we're going to see more and more of as we look further and further into the future of AI. But to recap, so what happened with connection across the various tech cycles? So with broadband, I think the main connection was with content. It gave consumers access to more content at their fingertips, and it changed the way that marketers needed to reach these consumers, because all of a sudden we were spending more time online looking at content, and that content needed to have advertising. And so digital advertising started to take off. In the social media era, the connection point was to community, however we define that, whether it was our friends, our family, people we follow, creators. We connected more deeply as consumers with what we consider our community. And for marketers, they had to change things too. In order to connect with these consumers in these new communities, marketers have to embed themselves in those communities and become an organic participant in the community, as well as by advertising to reach people in those communities. The smartphone, I think the connection there was to communication, and communication in the palm of your hand. Again, not only physically communicating, with people, but communicating with brands, communicating your interests, sharing all of that in the moment, on the go. And once again, mobile advertising and mobile marketing, those were fundamental changes in the way that businesses had to operate. So here we are at the AI era. I believe that a new wave of connection is coming, but I also think there's a lot of work to be done to bring consumers along and to help them to understand what AI is and how it can work for them. In some respects, though, AI is already a connection tool for us. It's kind of weird to think about AI as a connection tool, but it actually already is in some ways. And in one way is with ourselves. I mean, some of you have probably seen, or most of you probably have seen Reed AI. If you haven't, you have to go find his videos. Reid Hoffman created an AI version of himself, which he uploaded all of the vast content that he's created, his thinking, his books, all the things, every single thing that he could. And then he started having conversations with himself. It's remarkable, and we're seeing other people do this. And I heard a rumor, I don't know if it's happened yet, that the Reed AI is going to be talking to someone else's AI and having a conversation. So that just kind of blows my mind. Another way that we're connecting is with our children through AI. Now, my daughters are both Gen Z, so I don't sit and read them bedtime stories very much. But if you have kids who are younger, I bet you're probably using AI to read them a bedtime story. You can be a lot more creative, as this cartoon points out. You can tell it to write a story about a puppy who goes to Jupiter on her birthday to solve a mystery. And oh, by the way, is a mermaid. And you do it in an engaging and humorous tone, and for whatever reason, if you wanted to, in the style of Ernest Hemingway, and the AI will nod, and virtually, of course, and give you a story that you can tell your children. And on a more serious note, AI is also helping people connect with their loved ones who have passed on. In China, there is a growing industry of AI companies that are helping people create what's called a digital afterlife by using, again, all of the content that people can find, social media posts, pictures, videos, anything related to this person, and they're creating a persona that then the loved ones can interact and engage with, even though that person has passed. So it's remarkable, to think about some of the ways that AI is already starting to connect us. And on a data standpoint, more people are using generative AI. The Verge found in a survey conducted late last year that 2 in 5 Americans are using an AI tool, and that's up a few points from 6 months prior. You'll see in this chart that younger generations are much more likely to use AI tools, just like in social media back in the day. I think in this group, we're probably closer to that 64% than we are to the 18% for average boomers. But it's also, I think, really important to remember that we're not average consumers when it comes to AI, that there's a lot of people out there who really don't know what it is and need some help to understand it. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Florida visiting my parents, and my dad, who is 87 years old, he's an avid Siri user. And by the way, I can't wait to show him what he can do with Siri once Apple starts to roll out some of its integrations with ChatGPT. But he hadn't really heard anything about ChatGPT. So I sat down with him one day while we were in the house, and I said, Dad, I want to show you. You use Siri so often. He presses the button and he asks it all sorts of questions, like multiple times a day. And I said, Dad, if you like Siri, you're probably going to like ChatGPT. So we went on and I asked him, well, what do you want to know? And he likes to follow stocks. So his first question was, what did the S&P 500 close at yesterday? Well, ChatGPT got it right. Yay. Second question he asked was, what's the year-over-year performance of a stock that he's been invested in? So I asked ChatGPT, we got a stock chart, we explored all the fundamentals, we looked at analyst recommendations. His eyes were just like widened. And remember, this is an 87-year-old man, and I'm like, Oh, cool. This is going to be so fun. So his next question was, well, does ChatGPT know anything about you? So we went online and typed, who is Debra Williamson? And ChatGPT came up with a pretty decent summary of who I am. Made some mistakes, but there's that. And the further and further we got into it, the more excited he got. I want to share that story with you because I think that that's the sort of thing that I think we all need to do in our personal lives, but also in our professional lives. And so, thanks to things like that, ChatGPT usage is trending up. It's not as high as you might think. 23% of adults have ever used it, up from about 18% in July, according to Pew. But what I think is interesting about Pew's findings is that ChatGPT is being used at pretty similar rates across generations, not only for tasks at work, but to learn something new or for entertainment. So we are seeing people start to use generative AI to do more things. It's not as high as we might think it is, but it is creeping up. And the good news is that among people who use AI, they generally think it's pretty useful. About 80% of people who were surveyed by the Center for Digital Future at USC Annenberg think it's at least somewhat useful to their lives. And there's only around 20%, just under 20%, who said it's not useful or not very useful. So that's good news as well. But on the other side, you've got this sort of overhang of the fact that AI is also worrying us. And there are a lot of reasons why it could be worrying us. But I think one of them for the average person is seeing headlines. And these are just a few of the headlines that I captured just from the past few months. And so if you're not in the industry and you're seeing these headlines and you're going, huh, okay, well, what do I need to know about it? And then you might even see a headline like this. And you might go, okay, why should I ever use AI if it's going to destroy humanity in 5 to 10 years? Obviously, I think this headline is hyperbole. I hope it's hyperbole. I don't think it's going to happen. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of the average consumer, they don't really necessarily know what to believe. I also think they just really don't understand yet what AI is, how to use it, or how it benefits them. And I also think they're going to be scared shitless if they do what I did, which is go to Meta AI and type in a prompt that says, show me worried people. And I get this image. If you can see the guy that's kind of like to the middle left with his head is literally flying off of his face is flying off of his head. First of all, horrible AI. Second of all, okay, this could very well be exactly how people feel when they think about AI. Their heads are flying off. I wanted to share that with you because it just cracked me up as like one of the typical ways that that Meta AI messes things up. So what do we need to do? I shared the story of me sitting down with my 87-year-old father because I think that educating consumers needs to be a priority. This survey got a lot of attention last week and the week before when it came out. It was from Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, and it found that in the US, only 7% of US internet users use ChatGPT daily. Now, I shared some figures earlier that showed that usage of ChatGPT is trending up, but a lot of people kind of glommed on that daily headline and said, oh no. People aren't using ChatGPT and generative AI nearly as much as we thought they were. Is the sky falling? The good news is I don't think it is. I think when you look back at the previous tech cycles, like the ones that I've covered so far in this presentation, uptake of these things all started fairly slowly at a similar rate. So the sky is not falling. But on the left side of this chart, we have 47% of people who haven't heard of ChatGPT. That figure, I think, should give us all some pause. Not that ChatGPT is necessarily the one and only generative AI service that we think people should use, but it is the one that does have the most name recognition. If you look at other surveys, I mean, it's got more name recognition than Copilot or Gemini or Claude or, Meta AI, all the ones that we talk about on a daily basis. So if 47% of people haven't heard of ChatGPT, we have a lot of work to do to get more people comfortable. So whose job is it to educate these consumers? Is it the AI companies? Should OpenAI be doing education campaigns? Anthropic, Perplexity? We're starting to see that, by the way. Perplexity it just took out a TV ad in one of the NBA final games. I don't know if you saw it, but it was super interesting. Big tech, maybe they should do this. Maybe Google, Meta, Amazon, or Apple should. Maybe it's the media. Instead of writing those headlines about bad news from surveys, maybe media companies like TV or digital media publishers, audio podcasters should be educating people. Should it be marketers? People in our world, should we be doing this? I think it's all of us. I mean, I think everybody has a role and a stake in helping educate consumers on the benefits of AI. It's incredibly important. And to me, I think the way to help consumers become more comfortable with AI is to put this concept of connection at the center of everything that you do. Just a few ways, and we could spend a whole other presentation talking about connection, and maybe when we're done, we can have a conversation about it, but just a few ways that I think we as an industry can help consumers start to feel more comfortable and connected with AI. One of those is to personalize our interactions. I mean, AI offers us this wonderful ability to create personalized experiences. And I think the more that people experience the personalization aspect of AI, the more comfortable I think they're going to be with it. AI agents and chatbots is another area where I think is a lot of promise. I think helping people save time is a message that I think all of us are going to want to hear. And I'm going to be excited to see how companies like Apple and Google and Meta and plenty of others that are starting to work on AI agents will help people to understand how the potential of maybe not only using AI to help book a flight or get a train ticket or something like that, but to maybe plan our whole trip to France. And then, of course, on the other side of it, behave yourself. It's so incredibly important to be transparent and ethical in how you use AI, because people need to understand what it is, how they're, if you're using their data, how they're using your data. I mean, we're seeing already, concerns about Meta and how it's training its AI on people's posts from years ago and causing a lot of uproar in Europe and other places. So, I could spend a whole presentation talking about Meta and its privacy problems, but I think it's just, fundamental table stakes that the more that you behave yourself and act in a transparent and ethical manner, the more people are going to be likely to trust what you're doing in AI. And the good news is that familiarity, it does inspire trust. These statistics kind of blew me away when I looked at the Ipsos consumer tracker, and this was just from 2 months ago. And they surveyed people, and they broke it up into people who use AI and people who don't use AI. Among people who often use generative AI, 81% of them said that they would trust product recommendations from a store or website's AI tools. And 81% also said they would trust product recommendations from a Gen AI app. But if you look at people who don't use AI, or who never use it and aren't familiar with it, the percentages are so much lower. 27% would trust product recommendations from a store or website, and only 11% said they would trust product recommendations from a Gen AI application. So what does this all mean? I think that a new era of connection is coming. We saw previous tech cycles like broadband connect us with content, social media with our communities, mobile phones with communication. the AI era is going to create a whole other series of connections. And I honestly couldn't think of one C word. So I've come up with four. I think we're going to connect in a deeper way with the culture around us. We're going to connect with a collaboration and be able to collaborate with each other and with the AIs in new ways. We're connecting with commerce in different ways. Again, AI agents are going to play a huge role in that. And creativity, literally the ability to create and iterate and think something and will it into being with AI is going to happen. And I think as marketers, we're all going to have to change the way that we think about connecting with our audiences and our consumers and our constituents across these areas of culture, collaboration, commerce, creativity. It's going to take a lot of work. It's not going to be easy, but I think we're going to look back, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and realize that this was an incredible opportunity to start to reach consumers in new ways, but we have to help them. We have to give them the tools they need to feel comfortable with it. So that's what I have to say about connection and reaching consumers in the AI era. In the spirit of connection, please connect with me on LinkedIn or visit my website to learn more about me. But thank you, David. I'm going to turn my presentation off unless there was anything that people wanted to look back at. And yeah, we can chat about connection.
Yeah, well, I'm curious to hear from everyone else here. What are questions that you have for Debbie?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you not hear or? Because
Awesome. I think I had to change my speaker settings when I went back to the Zoom.
Okay, so we have a question coming into the chat from Bisrat. You compare where we are today in AI with previous cycles of broadband and mobile. What do you think are the top opportunities for marketing entrepreneurs?
Ooh. Those are good ones. So I think right now AI has, I think it's going to be in the future. I think it's the AI agents. I really believe that we're going to be able to do so much. Like we're going to look back right now on all of the steps it takes to do something, whether that be the simple thing of searching on Google and reading a whole bunch of links for ourselves and coming up with a viewpoint, which is already changing with tools like Perplexity or ChatGPT. You don't necessarily need to do that anymore, or the AI overviews on Google. I think AI agents are going to do that on steroids. And I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. And I'm personally excited. I mean, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, my dad and my daughter and I went to Finland and we worked with a travel agent to plan this personalized trip. Legitimately worried about the travel agent's future business, but a lot of what we did with the travel agent, I think will eventually be able to be done with AI, with the exception of those like on the ground type of experiences where like we're standing in Helsinki in front of the cathedral and someone is telling us about it. I don't necessarily think the experience of that is going to be the same with AI, but the planning, I think, will take place in AI.
I want to get to Eric, but since you mentioned what we've done with Google and the complexities of search and how that changes, I mean, do you think that Google's search revenue and like a lot of its like cash cow is going to materially change the next few years? And do you think that's also going to change like the opportunities for advertisers to reach such consumers? Do you think that that's going to be a material shift coming up?
That's a huge topic of conversation. Yeah, these are big issues, right?
Yes.
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Google, becoming sort of like its own walled garden. In some ways, it already is, with all of the snippets and widgets and panels and things like that. When you do a search, you don't necessarily even need already to go, if it's something simple like how old is Paul Rudd? You can get that without having to go to another website. And my sense is that, first of all, Google's talking about incorporating advertising into AI overviews. So right now it's telling people, if you're an advertiser on Google, you don't really need to do anything to be considered for, having your ad placed on AI overviews. Over time, I think you'll be able to bid on those, just like you would on other, kinds of placements on Google. The larger question of the publisher ecosystem and what happens there, again, David, we could have a whole other session on that with people who are in because I honestly think that would be interesting, like bring in some people who are in the publishing ecosystem and talk about what's happening to them, because they're not only are they facing this fundamental issue of how is my content being used and usurped by these AIs, and do I allow it or not, or do I accept payment for it or not? They're also dealing with the fact that, maybe someone who's doing a search on something is not necessarily even going to their website anymore because the answer is being given to them right there.
Yeah,
I don't have an answer for that, but it's kind of
I
scary.
mean, with the example you share about your dad in the stock market, like for me, the version of that I can't stop thinking about is using ChatGPT for recipes. And not only can I get something really personalized, but I can customize it. Oh, you know what? The cooking time's too long, or I don't have this ingredient, and it just tells me. And I think of all like how recipe sites gamed Google so well and so badly that it is such a terrible user experience to go through and you see like 100 ads served before you just know, what ingredients to put in there. And now it's but actual people can, lose their livelihoods along the way or have to adapt. So there's a lot of big stuff here. Eric, you've been so polite raising your hand, so thank you.
No worries. So hey, Deborah, the conversation you was having with David about this area, I was thinking as you were going through your timeline about when we broke the advertising market model. So like when everything, like, because at the beginning, like we just had a little postage stamp ads and, that wasn't really volume, but now like, look where we are 30 years later, everything's falling apart. So I'm wondering, it's kind of a two-part question. Looking back on your retrospective, where do you think, was there a singular point where as the whole ecosystem of publishers, content creators, advertisers, and brands could have made a different decision about how the digital ad market was going to function and how it was going to be, like what the compensation model was going to be and so on? And then using that as a learning, is there a parallel with what you see happening now that we could take and say, we learned how to break it, let's fix it as we go into this next generational opportunity to build businesses and create new capabilities?
You had another question that we could do an entire.
Two questions.
Oh my gosh, David, I'm giving you so many ideas for future conversations.
And
thank you for that question.
How deep this community goes. So and no softballs here.
No softballs here for sure. No, I mean, I think it's such an interesting question because you're right. I mean, digital advertising is I have to be a bit biased here because I spent so many years of my life covering social media that I think that, social media was the thing that to me really fundamentally changed digital advertising in good and maybe many not so good ways, right? Obviously what Facebook hit on with targeting people based on data that it had hoovered up back in the early days, we all thought that was awesome. Like, Mark Zuckerberg was put on a pedestal,
and it was so cheap. That was the other thing, kind of like that's the other part of the thing that broke.
Yeah.
Right?
And now, we kind of know what hath wrought those decisions. And the fact that I think in the AI era, the conversation about the AI tools, again, hoovering up everything that they can find about, all the data they can find. I can't imagine they're not going to be hoovering up, personal data as well.
Mhm.
And so
It knows
there
about you.
will be advertising. Go ahead.
It knows about you. Right?
Yeah.
Your profile.
Yeah, I mean, it knows about me, but say for whatever reason, it didn't say Deborah lives in Mercer Island, Washington, and has 2 daughters and a husband named Brad. It didn't actually go that far for whatever reason. But you raised a good point about that. It was a very professional sounding summary of myself. But now you all know all those details. So, there you go. I fully believe there's going to be advertising in AI experiences. We're going to see ads probably in Chat GPT. We're obviously going to see ads next to AI overviews on Google. There's going to be marketing opportunities to be placed in the AI agent, conversations that you're having. So there is an opportunity to try to do things better now. My worry, though, is that AI is just moving so quickly that the time for those conversations, by the time you get the working groups together to talk about it, the AI companies have moved the conversation, 5 steps forward.
Mhm.
And that doesn't even begin to bring in like how slow the government moves.
Yeah.
And in coming up with regulation. I mean, they haven't been able to regulate big tech and social platforms, and however many times they've called Mark Zuckerberg and those people, before Congress.
Yeah, just to build on what you said and just add, so at New York Tech Week last week, I was at a AI Trailblazers Summit, and in one of the panels, they stopped and said, "Who thinks regulation's required in this space?" And probably 3/4 of the audience raised their hand. And then there was an asterisk, and it wasn't like totally take over, but like there needs to be some guardrails. That seemed to be a pretty common sentiment. And interestingly, for being a tech forward audience and group, and very dedicated capitalists, in the obviously in representation, for them all to say, hey, we need some swim lanes here. We need some guidance. We need to have some frameworks for how to think about it. That was very telling.
I think it's telling. Everybody says that. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg says we need regulation. So I think just saying we need regulation is kind of table stakes. I think seeing regulatory groups being put together, whether it's industry level or within companies, is another thing. It does worry me that, you see news reports of companies like OpenAI, their executives leaving who were involved in safety and governance and things like that. That definitely does worry me that, within companies, there's this sort of charge ahead mentality and not, look at the consequences.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah. Who else has something?
Well, I have a question for the group, because we started out talking about Apple and Apple, the Apple, AI, Apple Intelligence. And I want to know if there's people here who thought it was going to be, an absolute game changer. What are we, what are we missing?
Doesn't exist yet, right? It can't work on all but the last phone. That's ironic, considering,
Yeah, I mean, it's like, 'cause I made a comment in my recent newsletter that like, I've seen some commentary around Apple that wound up being kind of timely with how it all fits together, where like, because I've been trying all these standalone hardware devices and have now tried the Rabbit and the Ray-Ban Meta and the Humane Pin, fortunately, before the case caught fire. And so I've got a series of refunds that have all come my way. I think I've got another device downstairs right now, the Lucid eyewear that I saw advertised on Facebook. And it's like, the hardware that has been most impactful for me is I'm also on this new HP laptop that's like the most I've spent on a laptop in a while. And I needed it mainly to run all these AI things that kept crashing whenever I download anything or a new extension. Like I'm like, and once I actually looked at the specs of my own laptop, it's amazing. It lasted. It was like barely better than what you'd expect out of a Chromebook for processing power. This is the first time literally since around the year 2000 that I looked at like processing power and RAM for a computer. I just haven't cared when everything's just like web-based productivity tools and things like that. So I think what Apple's reinforcing here is that so many of the winners in AI on the hardware front, like there are going to be companies like not just, I mean, obviously we've seen this, I don't know if NVIDIA is like its own bubble or what, but like companies like Dell and Lenovo and let alone Apple, like they're going to be profiting from everyone making sure you've got the latest chips. It's because you still need a lot of power to run these things, and if you're on like a few-year-old laptop and you try to do this stuff, like you're going to wonder what the hell happened to your computer. So it's like HP's got to be loving this, even if they're not an AI company.
Well, I think it's an interesting point, and I actually was looking through the chat, and someone asked a question about whether AI adoption will be faster or steeper than previous tech cycles. And one thing that I do think Apple has going for it is this enormous installed base, right, of people who are using its phones and its iPads and its watches and its computers. Because if you think about, for example, like Facebook, whenever Facebook would make a change, they just kind of rolled it out and people had to, maybe they didn't like it, but they had to use it. I think like way back in the day, like going from, introduction of the news feed, people complained about that, but Facebook was like, we're rolling it out anyway. Apple could very easily just make these AI tools like just embedded into everything that we do. And so we kind of can't escape it. And so to answer that question, I definitely think that, if it's an integral part of how we use a device, then of course AI adoption is going to soar because people are going to use it without necessarily knowing that they're using it. And so companies like Apple, I think Microsoft is rolling Copilot into some PCs, on the application side or the app side, Meta's got AI tools embedded into some of its, actually all of its properties in some way or another. Those are kind of easier to avoid. But if it's on the hardware side, if you get enough companies embedding AI, generative AI tools and putting them in front of consumers, then, we're probably going to see growth much quicker than some of the previous cycles.
Well, this has been tremendous. Thank you so much for sharing all this research and for being part of the community. And hope you have some great conversations with some of the folks who connect with you from here. Next week, I think we have an open-ended community conversation. So look forward to hearing your thoughts on what's brewing. And then just continue things from there. We're getting more speakers lined up. We got a special presentation with Captain tomorrow on sales using AI generated content to power sales. So much more to learn. Debbie, thanks for just being part of this and helping us get smarter and get us more perspective on this. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thanks, everybody.